who are in his little community are people who have no idea how to solve even routine everyday problems. Go ahead, Stacy.
Real quickly, can I just switch out and use the word challenges? Because it sounds to me, I think it's important. And I also think that without challenges, there isn't anything really left to do. Like, why else be here?
But why wouldn't you learn problem solving techniques as opposed to just have a community of people who are kvetching about their unsolved challenges?
Well, you're making an assumption that they haven't learned techniques. Just because you haven't solved a certain problem doesn't mean you haven't learned techniques, because the problems themselves or challenges themselves and the situations that surround them change in every moment.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I was surprised that he didn't dive into that problem. When I posted that I'm not sure if you know what problem I'm talking about, Stacy. Are you?
I don't.
Okay. So there is a national math contest every year called the American Math Society Contest. It's for high school age contestants. And every year they have this contest. So there was, and they're all designed that if you have a high school education and you're a conscientious high school student, not a flunk out, you should be able to solve these problems. They're problems if you haven't seen before, they're not in the textbook, but you can think your way through to solve them with an ordinary high school education and some, not being addle-pated brain. So there was this one problem that turned up that somebody noticed that when they gave this problem to the Chat GPT things that they couldn't solve, the Chat GPTs couldn't solve this problem. Neither Bard could solve it, nor ChatGPT, nor any of these other large language models. None of them could think their way through this problem that ought to be solvable by a reasonably competent high school student from this national math exam. And I confirmed that because I gave the problem verbatim to Bard and ChatGPT, and sure enough, they just got totally flummoxed and couldn't think their way through it. So there's this Facebook group called Problem Solving, and I happen to be not the founder of it. The original founder of it invited me into it years ago. And within a year of him inviting me into it, he vanished. He left the group. And because he was the founder, it suddenly had no founder left, no owner. And it turned out, I didn't know this at the time, that if you're in a group where there is no owner of the group, anyone can promote themselves to become the owner.
I don't know that that's true. I don't think that's true, because you can't get administration prep. That's not true, actually.
It was true then. I don't know if they changed it. I mean, you can create a group, invite me in, leave, then I'll see if I can promote myself. And then we can throw away the group. But in this case, I promoted myself to become the owner. This was about 10 years ago or whatever. And I became the owner of the group. Then I invited 3 other people in who I thought were really good at problem solving. And I gave them administrative power, and then I basically became the meta owner. I hardly ever participated. And that group grew from a few hundred people to like 4,200 people are in it, but almost nobody participates. Like, why are there 4,200 people who join this group that has almost no activity? So in any event, I posted this logic problem from the American Math Society contest into problem solving group to see if anybody would respond. One guy who I happen to know because he worked at BBN where I worked solved it. The only other person who even responded to it was Oliver Siegel, who, well, actually, I should say that I invited him because I said, Oliver, you could maybe give this problem to your company, Enalv, not knowing what Enalv was. Right, and he gave me this kind of a weasel worded answer, like, well, maybe Enalv together with the large language models could solve it. And I pointed out, well, the large language models can't solve it. They haven't. And he wanted to talk about the problem, but never make any attempt to actually think it through. And I was surprised. I go, why doesn't he even attempt to think it through? He wants to talk the talk, but he doesn't walk the walk. And that's when I said, I better go back and take a look at this Evolve company and see what the hell it really is. And that's when I found out it's just a conversation among people who come to talk to each other about their unsolved challenges. And he never did. I mean, he basically made one or two sentences. Oh, here's the giveaway. The answer had to be a number between 0 and 31 because that was part of the framework of the problem. So he said the solution is a number between 0 and 31. True, that's not the solution. That's where he stopped. That's where I began to wonder, what the hell's going on? How can this guy be the owner, founder, CEO of a problem-solving company where there's no evidence of any acumen at problem solving?
But that's not the purpose of the company.
That's what I found out. Because I thought but he made it sound like that you buy his software, you buy his system, and it enables you to solve problems. It's advertised that way.
Yeah.
And I asked, for example, Google Bard, I said, do you know anything about this company Evolve? And Google Bard gave me an answer, but it made up the answer. It synthesized an answer it actually didn't know. I said, who are the principals? That is the main, and Google Bard listed all the famous people from Y Combinator in Silicon Valley as principals. I said, well, who's the CEO? And it gave me two different answers, neither of which were Oliver. And I realized, okay, ChatGPT and Bard are just synthesizing, stochastic, making up stories, and they're totally baloney.
But Barry, they've not been professing to do anything other than that.
I know, but the thing is that when you ask them a question and they give you what sounds like an authoritative answer, and you realize, no, they just made that up.
Yeah, it's plausibility.
Yeah, but they, for example, I had found this previously because when I wanted to find out what it knew about my own research, it told me about my own research, except it had nothing to do with anything. I mean, it was just completely made up. And I would send it to my own blogs. I sent it to my blog and I said, can you summarize the content of this blog that I wrote? And it summarized it, but it was not what was in it. It was just made up a story based on the title of the blog.
Well, I asked a pretty simple, what I thought would be an easy question for it to answer, and it got stumped. First, I asked for the differences between Judaism and Christianity, and I was able to get an answer.
Oh,
but
yeah.
then excuse me?
Because there's tons and tons of literature about that out there that it can.
Wait a minute, but then I asked for the difference between the Muslim religion and the Jewish religion, and it couldn't answer me.
Did it decline to answer you? It
just kept buffering and buffering.
Oh.
And I tried it a number of times.
That was ChatGPT?
Yeah.
That's because it was overloaded.
I know.
It's not that it couldn't, it's just that the servers were overloaded.
But I did it more than once, and I was able to get other questions answered at the same time. So it was overloaded on that question.
No, that's interesting. Let me see. Let me go to chat. This is the free version, right?
Yeah. Sam, why are you smiling?
I'm just going to put out what I say on the thing, and Oliver loves it. Give me a heart. Oh, a heart from Oliver.
The difference between, what was it, Judaism and Islam or Muslim?
Yeah, Jewish and Islam. Yeah.
Yes.
Judaism and Islam?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you read my statement saying the problem is a situation where there is insufficient knowledge, resources.
Oh, thank you, Josh. Sorry.
It's
generating and they deal with it, because two things, right? One is that there's too much data on both religion that is so confusing that I have no idea what to do with it because I have insufficient CPU power to process that. or it's just too controversial, it's nothing I want to touch or something along that line.
Well, that's what I was trying to do. Like when I started with my first question, it was easy for me to find the three things where I saw the three differences that I saw would be the things that I would discuss.
Right.
Where so I wanted to then, take that and see where the differences in this would be. And I was disappointed. But I'm going to look now and see.
I have the first sentence: Judaism and Islam are two distinct religions with different beliefs, practices, and histories. Here are some of the key differences between Judaism and Islam. And then it lists 6 differences, which I won't read right now. And then it concludes, these are just some of the differences between Judaism and Islam. There are many more complex differences in beliefs, practices, and histories. But it gives a numbered list of 6 differences.
Can you put that in Messenger for me, please?
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
may have to do it in parts.
You're doing 4.0 or 3.5 or whatever.
This is the 3 point. I'm pretty sure this is 3.5. Let me just
Yeah,
see.
if you change, unless you change it, you got 3.5. Do the 4.0 version. It's much cleaner.
I'm pretty sure. Well, I have to go back and see. It's not easy to determine which version it was in, but
You go back and add the
let me see if this will fit in the chat in one fell swoop.
If it's too much, you don't have to.
No, it's just that Zoom has a limit to how much you can paste, and it's beyond the limit. So I'm going to go back and do the first half of it. I'll do my question and up to the third, or up to the halfway. Come on.
Okay.
I have to do it in 2 installments. Copy, paste. Oh, and when you do this, you lose the numbering. For some reason or other, the way it does numbers, when you copy and paste, you lose the numbering prefixes. But there's 6 paragraphs that should be numbered, where it has a word and a colon.
I got the same thing, Barry.
That's just you got exactly the same text or different slightly?
I don't know if it's exactly the same because it's making it up on the fly, but I got 6 things, and then these are the key differences between, but it's important to note both religions share some similarities, such as belief in God and commitment to ethical and moral behavior. That's what I got at the end.
So it gave them beliefs, holy books, prophets, religious practices, religious authority, historical context. Those are the 6 named.
I got beliefs, holy books, prophets, practices, holidays, and history.
Yeah,
so you got a slightly different some subset.
Yeah, it's just making it up on the fly.
Exactly.
none of that is what I was looking for. Whereas in the first question, it got into like for example, in Christianity, God is like, it can manifest physically. Whereas in Judaism, I forgot the word they used, but it's not anything that's a physical manifestation of God.
Exactly.
This is more like historical, that it really.
And I could ask the same thing in Google Bard and probably get, a roughly comparable answer if you're interested, or you could do it yourself. I mean, you have access to both Bard and ChatGPT now?
No, that's okay. I have an actual person I'm going to talk to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Basically,
you get conventional wisdom, as it were. Go ahead, Joshua.
Oh, I was just going to say 2 things. One, I've been trying to get on the meeting all morning. Had me holding I got on at 8:02.
Sam was traveling.
Oh, okay. I figured something like that. And then the other thing, I think, Stacy, you bring up a good point, which is a different conversation. If it's not giving you what you want and you assume it doesn't know, how many people are also experiencing that situation where they're like, well, you know what? This thing doesn't work. This thing sucks. It doesn't know. It's not good. So I'm just wondering, as we move forward, what kind of guardrails they'll put on this, where some people get a certain specific answer that it seems like it doesn't know, and then other people are going down the rabbit hole of all the things it does know, and how much dissonance is that going to create with people thinking without, it's like filter bubbles on the internet. we think this is the information, and it's nice that we're all talking together. I think we need more of this to see that we're all getting the same information. Or obviously Barry and I both compared notes and we got different information. So
Well, I was thinking you didn't know much about the Quran.
The
it
thing
does.
is that I wouldn't know if it was right or wrong because I don't know anything about the Quran. So if it gave me a bullshitty answer, how would I know if it was, semi-accurate? By the way, Sam, this is GPT 3.5, the default version
Yeah, that's what I thought.
that I was in.
Unless you manually select 4.0, you don't do that. So I'll address a few issues here what we just listened to. One is that, like Barry just say, you have a 95% circle. ChatGPT has a 95% circle, and we have no capability to evaluate it's true or false. And then you see how the confusion can create the gap become 95% times 95% is the way I call it is, if you know 90% and someone knows 90%, you have a 20% error right there, because 0.9 times 0.9 is 0.1, 0.81, right? So you got the math figure out really easily. It's like you got 19% failure rate right there, even with that 0.9%.
Think of ChatGPT as having a degree in the liberal arts, a college education in liberal arts. And you say, tell me about some topic that you would cover in liberal arts. It will just give you some general impression of it. There's no right or wrong answer in the liberal arts. Unless you say, well, such and such an author wrote this quote. And if you ask it about a particular quote from a particular author in the liberal arts, it'll get it wrong practically every time. But if you ask it for general interpretation of some topic in the liberal arts, it'll give you some interpretation that you say, all right, that's a plausible answer.
Yeah. Another way of perspective I just thought about is, I think of it that you pick up a piece of really nice, juicy clay quality mud. You take a really good artist, expert, to make it a beautiful something. Unless you have the capability, a tool is just a tool.
It makes up pretty good poetry. I mean, it's not Keats, but if you ask a student, write a poem, it's about what you'd expect from a pretty decent, A or B class college student to write a piece of poetry, and writes it instantly.
Yeah. So how I use it right now is that I ask a question in both places, and I copy and paste it to my Microsoft Word. I use my tool to grammar check, and I read it manually to make sure it's say what I say and makes editing so that it become my version of it. That's the clay, something that I created from the clay that I just picked up.
Yeah. But don't ask it to solve something in the STEM disciplines where you got to get it exactly right.
Yeah.
There's no, loosey-goosey stuff. And in the sciences where we don't have good theories and it is loosey-goosey, it'll give you the same bullshit everybody gives you.
Yeah. So go back to the problem. It's a situation where it's insufficient knowledge, resource, or wisdom to deal with it yet. ChatGPT will actually move you closer to 90%, and all you need to do is spend the 95% to get there. So hopefully you cross that line, so it's no longer a problem for you. So that is a tool for problem solving, if I may say that.
You can still learn a lot. I mean, it will introduce elements that you hadn't heard of that you can go and research, but you have to take everything with a grain of salt. This is sort of like, there was this old radio show, Fibber, McGee, and Molly. And there was Gracie Allen who would tell these crazy stories to George Burns. These systems have the gift of gab. Fibber McGee, the character on the old radio show, could make up these tall tales, which are hilarious, but they were perfectly coherent. Gracie Allen would tell these silly stories about her relatives to George Burns. People would laugh, but they knew that these were just, sketches. And these things are fabulous in playing the role of tell me a tall tale that you're making up on the fly. You've seen this, Stacy. We did it last week. Mm-hmm. We had said, make up a story, make up a fairy tale. Make up a fairy tale like that.
Another perspective is that the way I think about it is that I don't have a way to verify it yet. So if you have 20 data points about the same subject versus you got 2,000 data points on the subject, of course the 2,000 data point for the same facts is win, right? So you get the information. So deep learning is about all that. So if I can say that the response you got it back from AI would be the most populous verify facts, whatever you want to call that. So I'm assuming that's the case. So I'm assuming that if I want to know what's the most popular belief in current time about Islam, I'm going to ask ChatGPT instead of talking to the imam or whoever I'm talking, even claim expert. Yeah.
It's the normative interpretation,
Yeah.
what the semi-educated but not expert person would say.
Yeah. So one thing I can for sure is that the puzzle you put in there, Barry, most people cannot solve it in this world. Trust me.
I have had 4 people that I know of solve it with their own brain. The 4th person to solve it just did it an hour ago,
All right.
and it had been sitting there for a week. And this was in a group called Math Brothers.
Wow.
This is in a group about people who love math. I give them this logic puzzle, sits there for a week. One person finally narrates the solution, and it's perfect.
Yeah.
Doesn't even write an equation down. Just step by step.
My intention of that, I didn't tell you that my intention is to use the tool as much as I can to see how far I can go and what kind of help I can get to make it hope. And my answer is hopeless. There's nothing I can tell it so that it can solve the problem.
I tried to coach it to think its way through it. Utterly failed. And I'm pretty good at mentoring in mathematics. If I have a student who's on a homework problem and they can't get it, ever since I was a math tutor in college, I'm pretty competent at leading somebody to think their way through a problem step by step and solve it. I could not get the chat GPTs to follow me. I mean, they could follow me on one step.
Yeah.
2 steps later, they already forgot what they had 2 steps before.
Yeah.
Couldn't retain it. Go ahead, Joshua.
I was going to say you need to use the pine cone, which is the memory for ChatGPT.
The thing is that they have a scroll back of, I think, 80 sentences or something like that.
But it doesn't remember what it said. It remembers what you said and how it responded, but it doesn't keep the memory to go back and use that memory. It's still, we're still evolving.
The basic problem was, in the problem, a particular word had a very precise meaning in the context of the puzzle. But that same word has an ordinary dictionary meaning, which is different than the precise subset of possible meanings. And after like 2 or 3 times, it would go back and use the dictionary meaning and then do the stochastic prediction based on the dictionary meaning and not the precise meaning. Within the context.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get it to stick with the precise definition. I would say, go back to the problem. How is this word defined? And it would repeat that. But then right away, it would do, the way this word is ordinarily used in ordinary conversation, this is one of the things that you could say about it. Yes, that's true, but that's not the problem.
Well, that's because the dictionary has the 10,000 pound weight, and your special meaning has only 1 pound weight, my friend.
It couldn't maintain the context of the defined puzzle.
Yeah.
It kept drifting away from the definition. And by the way, Oliver did the same thing. I would give him a problem and he would slightly change the subject and answer an unrelated, a different, sort of related, and he would gradually drift away from the original.
So it's exhibiting human behavior, Barry.
Exactly. Let's change the subject, but subtly. Let me talk about almost the same thing, but a little bit different, and somehow dance away from the original context.
So have you guys come across Auto GPT yet?
Yeah.
Yep.
I've heard of it, but I haven't looked into seeing what it is.
I give you the post on your thing.
You put, yes, that's right. I started to play back that video and I got lost because he went into the weeds of how you download.
You can do the transcript. Go to transcript. The transcript will give you the step-by-step.
Yeah, you download it from Git and you have to install a bunch of stuff.
No, but they, if you read through, if you go through beyond the half, you give you a plugin or whatever that you can just plug in the API and that's you're done. 1-step process.
Yeah, and then you can only give it one goal, not a set of goals.
No, you won't remember the whatever you build up. That's only you have no long-term memory if you use the agent. This I remember now.
Yeah. So I got a vague idea of what it does, and I go, this is it more into the weeds than I'm ready for now.
But I also think also that the Auto GPT will actually, you know how you have 95% problem, unknown or whatever, smart, you only 95%, and the more you accumulate it, the more errors you're gonna get. You're gonna have a reason by the time it's useless. It's
It
how I
is.
think about it.
And if you're working in the research frontiers, chances are you already know more about the research frontiers than these chat GPTs do. Because they're going to be looking at really old stuff
Right.
and not the latest stuff. And typically in research, you
Except for
figure out
auto
what's
GPT.
the old stuff that you have to discard. That's past its sell by date. These things don't know what is. For example, if you ask it a question about physics, it will pull in Newton when you should be pulling in Einstein.
Because
so
you
it will go
don't have
back to the
10,000
old.
data point, my friend. I go
It goes-
remind you.
It goes back to the old models, which have fallen by the wayside in
Right.
terms of the framework that you're working in at the frontier. And it like at one time I was asking it about something that involved both Maxwell and Einstein. Now, Einstein said that he was influenced by Maxwell's kind of thinking, the mathematics, and ChatGPT claimed that Maxwell got his ideas from Einstein. He got the association, but he got the arrowhead of causality wrong. I said, when did Maxwell write his stuff? Oh, 1860. When did Einstein write? Oh, 1950. Who was there first? Oh, must have been Maxwell first. It didn't even have the notion of timelines, that you can't have retrocausality, that Maxwell
Einstein was
got his
earlier
ideas
than
from
that,
Einstein.
right?
That's a kind of
That means the number in the years has no meaning whatsoever. It's a text. It's not a
Exactly.
string. It's a string. It's not a numeric.
Exactly. And naively, you would think it would know that. But turns out
Wow.
that, you actually have to, it's like that movie, Stay Alive #5, the robot #5. And he's trying to cook he's got a package of frozen vegetables and he's reading the instructions. The instructions do not say to open the package and take out the contents. So he puts the whole package in the pan. And you go, this illustrates how a recipe has to be very, very precise beyond what you would use for an ordinary human. And I remember once reading a recipe for some vegetarian dish, and it says julienne the carrots. And I go, I know that means to cut it in some artistic way, but I have no idea what julienne means in terms of how you would cut a vegetable to have a certain artistic shape. I had to go look it up. The recipe doesn't say julienne the carrots and asterisk, here's what it means to cut it in that, you have to know the nomenclature.
You can add the word give me tips or give me illustration or give me, if you add that in your question or request, it will give it to you.
Yeah. So on the internet, I can highlight julienne and right click and say, please define this word for me. And this is the problem I have on the internet. I will use a word, which is a perfectly good dictionary word in English, but it happens to be not in the working vocabulary of one of my readers, which I don't know. So they come to this word and they are too lazy to look it up. And I have the impression that they read what I wrote, which maybe they did, and understood it. In fact, they didn't know what I said because there was a word in it that wasn't in the working vocabulary. And they sort of dance around it and nod their head politely and, smile. And I have the illusion that I communicated with them, but I didn't. I had one correspondent. She lived in Germany. She had very good English. And she actually taught both in English and German. And I found out after years when we chatted on Facebook Messenger that she had 2 dictionaries open at all times.
Mhm.
She had an English-German translation dictionary and then a regular German dictionary, because sometimes I would use an English word and she would look in the English-German translation to find the German word. And then she had to look up the meaning of the German word. And finally, she told me that. And then I realized I've got to go really slow. I have to type a sentence or a couple of sentences and then wait while she does all of that lookup to decode what I wrote. And I didn't know that, she was going to all this extra work.
I use the Google Translate. So translate English to Chinese and then Chinese back. To make
I
sure
did
got
that.
it
Yeah, I did
right.
that yesterday with a very famous 3-word phrase in Hebrew. And Google Bard says, I don't know how to translate that. I don't recognize that at all. And the 3-word phrase, which I gave both transliterated and in the original Hebrew alphabet, both ways, was Aheya Asher Aheya. It's 3 words that appear in the book of Exodus. And it's the answer to the question when Moses is being instructed by God to go liberate the Jews. And Moses says, yeah, I'm going to go down there and they're going to say, who the hell sent you? And the answer is, Aheya Asher Aheya. That's the name of the authority who's sending him. So what is Aheya Asher Aheya? I asked Google, I said, can you translate these 3 Hebrew words? Well, it's only 2 words because the first and the third word is the same word. So I know that Asher, the middle word, is a relative pronoun. In English, relative pronouns like who, which, or that. Asher can be any of those. It doesn't mean who or that or which, it could be any. And Heya is the future tense of the verb to be, will be. Will be what will be. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. That is the name of the authority who's sending Moses to go free the slaves. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. Go ahead, Joshua.
Oh, I was looking up all the central figures and all the different religions. And one of the things that popped up for Moses was, I am who I am.
That is how Tyndale, the translator who worked for King James, translated Aheya Asher Aheya. He
That's what I
translated it, I am that I am. He took Asher, the relative pronoun, and chose that.
Yeah.
Not who or not which or not whatever. And he took will be, which is just the verb, no subject, and he put the first person pronoun in front of it. I. It's not there in Hebrew. In Hebrew, it is perfectly grammatical to omit the subject of a sentence and just start with the verb. So if you look at Heya Asher Aheya, it's will be whatever will be. Que sera, sera.
Whatever works.
But Tyndale put a first person pronoun in it because in his view, you had to have a deity who's a storybook character who has the pronoun I.
You know,
Yeah.
this remind me of you know how you see a picture that you see an old man or a woman, the optical illusion. So whatever you see a lot of old men today, and the picture will show that as old men for you. So whoever that you're seeing. So it's sort of like you own the red Toyota Corolla, now you see them everywhere,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So that
Yeah.
whatever you see, it's what you see, what you got.
This is why in the Old Testament, you're not supposed to have idols. You're not supposed to have visual representations of the deity. Why? Because the deity is an abstraction. It's not a person or a character, a storybook superhero. It's an abstraction. And the abstraction is becoming. The process, the phenomenon, the spirit of becoming is what's manifest. What does becoming look like? Show me a picture of becoming as a storybook character. You can't. It's just, it's a phenomenon. What do scientists study? They study the phenomenon of becoming in the cosmos and biology and chemistry and whatever. What does becoming look like? Show me a picture of it, him, the superhero. It's nonsense. It's an abstraction.
To that, I just want to say 2 things. One is that Jesus came as a prophet and he was turned into a God, but he never wanted to be a God. He
Right.
wanted to be a messenger.
Right.
The other thing is, I was looking up about Islam, And Islam believes in those prophets. They believe in Jesus and
And Moses.
Moses.
And Abraham, yeah.
Yes. And so it seems we really screwed these things up.
Yeah.
Because if you put those religions together, we're kind
And
of
by the
believing.
way, you know, every character in the Bible has a name that's also a dictionary word or phrase. And so if you take in the New Testament Jesus, which in the Aramaic is Yehoshua. So here's Joshua. Joshua, you know what your name means originally. It means
Yep.
rescuer or savior. Okay. First responder. The yeah in Yehoshua is a reference to Yod He Vav He, becoming. The process of becoming will save you from going down the tubes. That's the name. The name of Jesus is the process of becoming is your salvation. Become. Go ahead, Joshua.
Oh, I was just looking up all the different religious figures, and it when you start going down the way people interpret the religious scriptures, you start to see the similarities. Like you're saying, it's becoming,
Right.
and all of the great spiritual leaders from Moses to Zoroaster to Jesus to whatever, when you drill it down, you get to the thing that's pretty much the same in all of them, which is just become in a good way that is honoring the being that is your life to your creator, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Like it's all the same. At least I come from a background where my dad studied comparative religions and at a very high level. And the more I would read about all these things or meet all these different people, it was pretty much at the drilled down level the same, but it's the languaging and the interpretation through the amount of people that studied it that scrambled it up like scrambled eggs. But it's all still an egg.
You ever study a military court-martial? You know the most common allegation that gets you court-martialed in the military? Conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman. Unbecoming is what gets you into trouble. What's the opposite of unbecoming? Becoming.
If I could just mention what I think is relevant to today and what's happening in politics today. The idea that we're responsible for our own salvation, which is different with some fundamentalist Christians, which thinks that salvation is something outside of themselves. If people could recognize that we are responsible for our own salvation in our own behavior,
Right.
that might be a better way to frame our discussions as they pertain to the way politics is. And that's why, and Sam Han's not on right now, but that's why for all these years, I've been like screaming and saying, stop fighting religions and let's talk to these people.
The word religion means linking back, religio, linking back. And you link back to the thinking of the people who were the first thinkers. Be aware of the phenomenon of becoming, because that's your life. So think about becoming. And it's an awesome process. Go ahead, Joshua.
Oh, well, when you say the first, it became something else, which became something else, which became something else. So there's no way to know what the first was.
Well, you have the text.
Becoming.
You have the text in the Hebrew that was written 3,500 years ago. That's what you have, the original text.
That's what you have.
Yes.
Yeah. And other people have other things.
Well, I mean, the New Testament, which was written 2,000 years ago or 1,900 years ago. You have the Quran, which is written, I don't know, when was that written? 1,500 years ago, whenever. And you have the Asian literature that was written 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years ago. You have all this, oral tradition.
There's a lot more. When you say the Asian, there's a lot of the Asian.
Yeah, you got the Buddhist texts and the Chinese stuff and a lot of stuff.
You got Maori stories that were written down in Polynesia. Right. You've got ancient Filipino stories, you've got Australian stories, you've got
Right.
Japanese stories that go way, way back,
All these
thousands of years
legends.
before the Chinese even came over to that island for the original. And I'm just saying, there's a lot from India. I mean, India was broken into many, 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 many countries before it was united by the British.
Right.
And that goes even back further to the Russian people that came from the north down to India. I mean, I'm just saying, to say Asia is like, there's so much.
Would it be fair to say that almost all of them believe in reincarnation?
Um,
Do.
I don't think that's fair to say. I think it's the word reincarnate is an interesting word.
Let's make flesh again.
In other words, there's a lot of people that don't believe in time the same way that the Western ideation of time is, of this before that. Like Barry was saying, I am who I am. I'm experiencing time. Some
Okay,
places,
so,
Yeah.
okay, so taking the directionality out of it, is it fair to say that multiple existences or the eternity of life is
Well,
present?
I love that you asked that question, Stacey, because I went down a rabbit hole of watching all these people who have near-death experiences. And it was interesting at all their different ways of interpreting that experience, because most of them had angels or other beings in another dimension talk to them. But how that person interpreted that was different for each near-death experience.
Well, the reason I think it's important is not so much as how it gets interpreted or whether it's past lives or parallel lives, but just because it makes life a cumulative experience and not like, oh, well, I'm almost at the end, so it doesn't matter. It's too late now, because you know that everything continues to matter. And that's why I think it's important.
Yeah, it's hard for me to talk in English and in Western thought about time because it's very different in other cultures and other parts of the world. It's just such a difficult conversation to have when there's no linear communication available, when it's circular or it's cyclical or it's non-linear. Time is a hard thing to talk about.
But in a
One thing
learning curve, it's easy, because in a learning curve, you have time, which isn't necessarily linear, because you can have a passage where you're working on some episode of your learning curve, and then it goes into suspended animation, and then it resumes later on. So, you know, you start the clock and you spend some time studying a subject, then you stop the clock and go eat lunch.
Yeah, but what about when there was no clock?
Well, there's always a there was the day, the yom. You had the 24-hour day with the Earth rotation, so you had that clock, the diurnal timekeeping. Your brain has several clocks in it.
But,
So
but
there
I'm
wasn't a
saying-
mechanical clock, but there was timekeeping.
go outside of the Earth, and what is a day like on Venus, or what is a day like on Mars, or what is a day like outside of Earth?
Yeah,
And
sure.
go
You can
out-
take the word and say it's one revolution on its axis relative to the fixed stars. That's how day was defined on this planet, but you can use the same definition for any planet.
Yeah, but I'm saying, what if it's there? Okay, go ahead, Stacey. I'm going down a rabbit hole. I'll stop.
Sam had something he wanted to share. Go ahead, Sam.
I'm going to say that a couple of things you think of this way. So if I would say something and my sound wave travel through the space, if somebody can run or go faster than my sound wave, can see that my sound wave is coming, but someone is behind the sound wave speed, is to say, well, the sound wave is already a past history. So that one perspective. You talk about cumulative is because I have one perspective, it's me. I'm running, when I say something, the sound is in the past because I remember that I said it. So again, those perspectives, you have to get it straight. Otherwise, you're going to get confused, like cumulatively more confused.
I mean, Einstein pointed out that, that your past is part of my future. And that makes perfectly good sense when you understand that information has to travel at a finite speed, and there's no such thing as simultaneity. Newton thought everything was, the clocks all ran tick-tock at the same time everywhere, and Einstein says, no, they don't. There's no such thing as simultaneity. That's a huge leap.
But what
That's a
about
quantum
spooky?
leap in understanding of time.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's why the spooky accent at a distance, if there is coherence between two different atoms, like, is there actual simultaneity, and does that transverse space?
The answer is no, that's a misconception. And that is not just a misconception, it's a tragic misconception. What
How
happens
so?
is, well, I was watching a video this morning in which a guy named Heinz Forster was talking about how you make a theory. And he says, in physics, whenever you have a theory that has a hole in it, there's a part that's missing, we typically invent a particle which fills the hole. And so we have all these particles, and then we put these particles in because there was a hole in the theory, we filled it with the particle. Well, that's definitely true in the mathematical physics sciences. That's, we invented the electron, we invented the neutrino because there was a hole in the theory, we invented a particle that filled the hole. If you have a narrative and there's a hole in it, you know what they do? They invent a word. They make up a word to fill the hole. In fact, God is an example of a word that fills the hole in a narrative theology. So we make up these words and suddenly we think that these words have meaning. No, they point to ignorance. They're the name of something that we imagine to be present because we actually have no knowledge. We have a gap. And putting in names to fill the gap is a common mistake. And the one that Joshua was representing here, spooky action at a distance. That was a made up phrase to fill a gap, and it's nonsense. There is no spooky action at a distance. That was in some sense a joke. The same true of entanglement. That was a word that was made up. What it stood for was a mathematical phenomenon called statistical correlation. Statistical correlation says, if I look at my watch and it says it's 11:58, I can predict that the clock downtown says about 11:58. I didn't make it have that. That was a statistical correlation because to within a minute or two, local clocks all tell about the same time. But my looking at my clock doesn't cause that clock. It's a statistical correlation. They're entangled in the sense that they're statistically correlated. Now, if my watch stops or I break my watch, that doesn't break the clock downtown.
Josh?
I was just going to bring up the fact that what if the clock doesn't actually exist at all, and you're creating that through your interpretation of your signals coming through your body?
Yeah, that's called hallucination, and it happens all the time.
But I'm saying the idea, and this is just a thought concept, that I'm not talking reality, but the idea that everything that you're experiencing is a made up thing.
My brain creates a representation, which is an approximate representation of what's out there, but it's not exact. It can't be exact. It's a model. It's a simplified version, and I give it a name.
Mm-hmm.
The name of my model is not the map is not the territory. I make a map. The map is simplified. It's approximately represents the territory, but it's not the territory. And if the territory changes, my map is out of date. And if I scribble on my map like the president did, that didn't change the territory. That's nonsense.
Is there a possibility that because of the confusion of the time factor, time quote unquote factor, and the reflection or reflective factors, like I'm looking at the reflective of the tree and under the lake or near the lake, I can see the reflection of it, and the light I'm traveling from my eyeball to the surface of the thing. So there's a reflection, confusion of reflection factor and the time factor that create this illusion that we're looking at.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
I mean, if I'm listening to my watch, it goes tick tock, tick tock. That doesn't mean that the clock downtown is going tock, tick tock, tick in sync. It's not even running at the same speed. It's running at approximately the same speed, but one mine goes tick. That one doesn't go tick or tock. It could be halfway in between.
Yeah. That's that you're exemplifying my point is it's relative. Like you told me one time, if you put the clock 20 feet up in the air, it's a different time.
Yeah, exactly. It runs faster, you know?
Right.
You know,
So every,
this cup up here is aging more slowly than this cup down here.
Yeah.
Measurably, if you use atomic clocks.
Yeah. And we're still learning that difference with gravity of the effect. And we have to use something to calculate a time frame in order to sync
Right.
your clock, Barry's clock, Sam's
Right.
clock, Stacy's
Right.
clock together. Otherwise, we're not able to communicate to each other.
Exactly. Those GPS satellites up there, they have to tell their clocks not to keep their time, but to keep our time.
Mhm.
Otherwise, the mathematics, the calculation of where am I and what time is it is all baloney. So we have to tell the clock, never mind how fast time is running up there, keep track of how time is running down here.
Yeah.
So you can give us an answer that we can rely on.
Yeah, I just ponder the idea of, you know, we're looking at these galaxies that were formed right after the Big Bang with the James Webb Telescope, and we're seeing differences in our understanding of how galaxies form.
Yeah.
But is this the only reality that exists in the universe? Meaning, are humans really the only thing that are here observing what's going on, or are there other beings?
We have
That
no
also
idea.
serve
We have
from
no
other
evidence. We imagine that there probably could be. There's no reason there couldn't be other intelligences, but we have no evidence one way or the other.
But
So
we
we gotta
do
know.
though. We have bacteria in the ocean that experience time completely different than us.
That's different. They're still on the earth. Are there bacteria on, I don't know. There could be organisms in the oceans of Titan or one of the moons of Jupiter.
But I'm saying the pressure is different, the heat source is different, their lifespan is different.
Yeah.
It's a very different reality. And for all we know, do they have consciousness?
Well, then it begs the question of how do you have to define it? And the problem with these words like consciousness is that there's so many ways to define it, and there's no agreed upon way to define
Well, instead of defining it, how do we understand it and how do we communicate with it? Meaning
Oh.
this bacteria and a crustacean underneath the earth.
See now you've passed on the challenge to what does the word understand mean? You know, STEM has this thing called deep grokking, which is deep understanding. And the reason that we have deep grokking is that most people don't have deep grokking. They have very shallow understanding. So what the hell does the word understand mean?
I'll change the word understanding to deep communication, to dialoguing with the bacteria.
So if I start talking to you in mathematics, I've encoded information in a language that chances are nobody else is going to decode. Even if they studied it, they probably wouldn't decode it. Look at these whales. The whales, they have this click communication, click, 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 click. And we know that they're communicating something, but we haven't decoded it yet. They're trying to
That's my
figure it
point.
out.
That's
Yeah.
exactly my point.
Yeah. So we know that animals typically click either for mating purposes, where are you? I want to mate, or there's danger, or there's not danger. Crickets stop chirping when there's danger. The alarm is go silent.
Mhm.
So we know that there's all kinds of signaling systems that encode information, which is life-saving. But we don't even know how to decode other animals. When did we finally figure out that crickets sound the alarm by going silent? I think that was maybe a few decades ago.
Yeah, we're very ignorant. I guess that's my whole point, is that our ability to communicate to the whole universe is at a very elementary level.
And we've only been able to send out radio waves for about a little over a century. So nobody who's within more than 100 light years away has ever received any messages from us. They don't have I Love Lucy yet.
But what if there were other signals besides radio waves that were sent out 50,000 years ago?
Well, there was light being reflected off the surface of the planet that would tell you what kind of cloud surface we had. We didn't make those signals. That was
Yeah,
those.
I mean, as an example, we've just now discovered nuclear, the ability to split an atom. But in the Mahabharata, they said they discovered that thousands of years ago, and they split the atom.
Well, atoms were splitting naturally. I mean, uranium naturally fissions.
Yeah.
It's not that anybody discovered it. It just happened to be a phenomenon.
So that's my point, is what if ancient human beings discovered ways to communicate using fission through a mountain and using other types of communication that we have yet to discover in this understanding of reality?
I mean, they had shouting, they had gestures.
But they had musical tones that they could vibrate rock, and the rock could vibrate, and that could send out a signal.
And they know that if you beat drums, you can send a low frequency sound a very long distance with drums. The
Mhm.
animals know that too. The animals, elephants and whales.
But I'm saying instead of the idea that they were primitive and less than, so that narrow thinking of the ancient people were not as intelligent as us, or the whales that are in the ocean are not as intelligent, thus we can harpoon them and take their blubber. What if they have a communication that is much more intelligent and are able to signal waves outside of the earth that we don't know that they're doing?
Well, they're smart enough not to create nuclear weapons and blow up the oceans.
Or maybe they already have, and then they transmitted their society into a different type of society.
I mean, the whales were mammals that went back into the ocean, got off the land. You have to ask yourself, why did the mammals who grew on the land go back to the ocean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have a good answer for that. I could speculate, but I don't know why certain species of mammals went back into the ocean. Maybe it was
That's
safer.
a good question.
Maybe it was safer. The oceans are probably a safer place to be if you can survive in them than the surface of the land.
You've heard of the aquatic ape theory, Barry?
Aquatic ape? No.
Yeah, it's the idea that humans were actually evolved in the ocean and then came up to land.
Well, you know, if you have a baby who's a few months old and you hold them, they will swim in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And the swimming reflex.
That's part of the theory.
Yeah, and because, you know, that's hardwired into the brain architecture from back when our ancestors were in the ocean, where swimming was part of, you know, the mobility thing was part of survival.
Yeah.
And babies,
So I'm saying that
will swim.
There's a lot to learn, is what I'm trying to say. Is I don't want to get on my high horse and saying we've only sent these signals at this time that we know of, but it's quite possible.
We've intentionally sent radio. Well, we sent radio signals unintentionally for 100 years before SETI decided to maybe we should think about sending them for real. And then they invented. I remember in the 1960s getting a copy of Scientific American. So I'm about 15 years old or so. And I'm reading this article in Scientific American saying, if we were going to send a message by radio that is easy to decode and clearly intelligent, how would you construct a message that a high school intelligent level creature could recognize this as not natural and decode it? And it was a very interesting article, thinking about sending a message that can be easily decoded.
Yep.
And Sagan worked on that with his little plaque on Voyager. Put a plaque that is image with it that they could figure out what it's saying.
But that type of thinking, I'm saying, in this reality right now, how are we sending signals to the trees that exist around, like in Sam's picture behind him? How do you send a message to a field of trees, of aspen trees?
Well, I know here that I would pound a fertilizer stake into the roots around a tree because it says, I love you and I want you to survive. So here's some nutrition. Because nothing says loving like something from the oven, right? So.
Right. Well, I'm saying if you take that love, what was the greatest piece of classical music that imbued the energy of love? And if you play that to the trees, how would the trees respond? Those are I mean, it seems like crazy thinking, but if you find that communication and the trees can respond back and forth, then now you're having a better conversation with the trees.
Yeah, I mean, I would make sure that they have sunlight, but I don't know that, I'm not sure that audio, if there is any audio that helps the tree, I don't know it. I know that sunlight will help it.
Yeah,
I know the
and what
water
if,
well, but
but what if the communication could be different layers of nutrition for the trees, saying you give them this type of fertilizer at this time, and then you do it in a communication language fashion, where every 2 hours you give a different message, a signal, and see how they respond in kind.
well, I mean, that's what agriculture does. It tries to figure out what nutrients to give when and how much.
Yep. Go ahead,
I'll
Sam.
introduce a word to this conversation here. It's called miracle. To me,
Seeing
the
something-
definition of miracle is that, the technology hasn't catch up with, you cannot repeat whatever you're doing yet. You call that a miracle, like in the old days, explosion is a miracle because they don't know how to make the fireworks yet, or, the powder yet, or whatever you want to call that. So as soon as you know how to repeat it, then the word miracle drop out into the background. It's gone. It's no longer a miracle.
It's now technology. Miracles have become technology.
Yeah, I'm not sure miracle become technology, or the technology was there waiting for miracle to go away, or the people to catch up.
Miracle
Whatever you
is
got.
seeing something. It's the seeing of it and recognizing and understanding of it that you can then husband it, manage it.
Right.
use
So
it.
so it has a time factor, it has a technology factor, as well as an ignorance factor, and we are blind to a factor, and we're not looking for a factor, as well as, all the confusion factors as well. So, if you introduce that, like, how do we communicate to the tree? Like the music, does that affect the tree? Well, all we do is have one tree that have no music, the other tree has music. It will find out in 3 months' time.
What we haven't learned to do is have a conversation with trees. Looks, I don't know how to have a conversation with one. I know how to enhance its well-being, but I don't know how to have a conversation with it.
That's
And
experiment already done,
it will
right?
thank me by bearing fruit. So maybe the fact that it bore fruit is thank you for giving me the right nutrition so I could bear fruit.
Yeah,
Maybe more fruit means shut up.
I think Sam's making a good point about miracles. Is there's indigenous people that have spent thousands of years with specific plants to really get to know them well enough, because they spend their whole day
Right.
talking to them and bearing the fruit and eating the fruit and then ingesting it, and then that becomes part of them, and that cyclical, that relationship, if you will, it is very special, and we've lost some of that relationship with certain things on this planet that we ingest.
Yeah.
Like our relationship with the animals that we slaughter.
Yeah.
and we eat.
Oh, that's another
And it's
perspective
a
of miracle I
profound.
didn't. That's another perspective of miracle I forgot, I left out, which is when you have a young child looking at a magician miracle perspective.
Yeah.
Seeing something you don't expect, being astonished and being curious, and then wanting to know, how did you do that? And can I do that?
And the illness get cured, the cancer went away, the disappear, whatever, that's a miracle. So again, it's
Because we
so
didn't
many
know
of them.
if it went away spontaneously, you're gonna know what happened to make it go away spontaneously. Can we identify the cause and effect details so we can manage the cause and effect to make cancer go away?
Yeah.
And what if we've already done that, but we've forgotten how to do that because of the process C is no longer part of our day-to-day lives?
I actually made up a word to name what you just talked about. I made up the word agnosimnesia. You can look this word up. You only find it in one or two of my blogs. Agnosimnesia is forgetting cultural wisdom of bygone ages. That there was a wisdom in our ancestors that was there, and it sort of faded, and today we've lost it. And I called it agnosimnesia. And then I said, how do you get it back? And I had to make up a name for that. I called it nosignemia recovery or something like that. I had to make up two words: losing wisdom and then rediscovering it. And I wrote a couple blog posts on that meme. I
That's
can
a
even give you the
particle.
link to them.
That's a particle to fill the void.
It's a what?
Your particles that to fill the
Right.
void.
I gave up. I imagined something. I didn't have a name for it. I
Yeah.
couldn't find a name for it. I made up
Yeah.
a name for it. Agnosimnesia. And then nosigemic recovery or something like that. Rediscovering long forgotten knowledge. And a lot of research, that's what research is. Research is going back and searching again in the records to try to find some idea that was there before and we lost it.
Yep.
In my own
And that
career,
cyclical, I'm saying that that's a cycle that we continuously go through.
right. And that's one of the reasons that I put everything on the internet, because I'm hoping that in the future, when somebody who is not me, but is thinking like me, is looking for an idea, that they'll manage to find something that I left as a breadcrumb, it's 40 years before, that helps them speed up the rediscovery and the redevelopment of the next phase. So
Mhm.
when I was doing tutoring, I was reinstantiating Socrates, even though I didn't know I was reinstantiating. Later, I realized, oh, I'm using the maieutic method of Socrates, which somebody had used on me, but never named it. Then I found out it had a name, and it's not a new idea.
Yeah,
And then
that's been my whole life. That's just discovering that everything I've ever thought of already existed and was named something else. That's my whole life, is just discovering I have a thought, this is how I process it. And then I find out, oh, that's a whole field of research, and it just keeps continuing. I'll never stop finding things that I think are original thoughts, but are absolutely unoriginal.
I'll tell you a funny story. In fact, I mentioned it this morning. When the researchers are working on these large language models, one of the favorite exercises that they give it is to tell the large language model, tell me something you've never read or thought of before. Now, when I saw that, it reminded me that one Easter holiday when I was visiting some friends and invited for their Easter, and they had all their family, and there was this 9-year-old niece of my friend, and I really didn't know her. I was meeting her for the first time, and I said to her, tell me something you've never heard of or thought of before. And she says, oh, I had a dream last night. She told me her dream. She didn't skip a beat. I gave her a question that's supposed to have no answer. Tell me something you've never heard of or thought of before. Immediately she says, I had this dream last night. And she tells me about it.
She moved the timeline, what you say instantly to last night. So you say when you say haven't thought before, it's okay for the last 24 hours.
But dreams don't have words. I mean, they're just, processes, in your dream sleep. But it's because I thought that she would say, well, that's an impossible question to answer. That's what I was expecting. No, she made something up that was not a thought. It was a dream. It wasn't anything she heard. And they do the same with these LLMs. They say, generate something that you've never already read or thought of yet. And it will generate something on the fly. It will spontaneously generate something novel by rolling the dice and generating a piece of text.
But isn't that the in science fiction that I'm trying to remember? I think it was Isaac Asimov that said Electric Sheep. It was a book. What does the computer dream about? Like the idea of the computer dreaming.
Yeah, and these LLMs do talk about dreaming.
Yeah,
the one called Lita, that has the YouTube channel with Ellen Thompson. When he talks to her, she talks about dreaming.
And what is dreaming besides defragging our hard drive? Like, what is that? There's so much to the idea of taking lots of information and reconstructing it in a way that is a narrative, like a dream.
It's like found art. You go to the beach and you pick up a bunch of junk, flotsam and jetsam, and you arrange them on a canvas to make a arrangement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it never existed before. It's made out of stuff that was never, you assembled stuff in some interesting artistic way, and you created, art. It's not right or wrong. It's just a piece of art. It's found art. Collage. People anybody could do a collage or figure painting. You stick your finger in a paint, you smear the paint on it, and you make something that didn't exist before. And you go, okay, now what is that? It's like a Rorschach test. Well, it looks like this or it looks like that, but it wasn't intended to look like anything. It was just assembling random stuff.
What you just said was the point I was trying to get to about time, is that we're constantly interpreting everything that is happening in order to understand it. And one of the ways that we interpret it was by putting a frame on it called time.
Well, yeah, because there was a time when it didn't have the collage, and there was a time when you had the collage.
Yeah,
And-
I'm saying, what if there was a moment, like if the very first person that ever existed on this planet and had no one else to talk to, what if there was no movement? Like what was happening before there was movement is my question, before there was anything created.
Well, if you look at the current theories of cosmology, there never was a time when there wasn't movement. And that's because if you buy the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which we cannot seem to falsify, then there's always movement, even in empty space, where there's no particles, there's no photons, there's no nothing. You just have these so-called fields, and these fields have this kind of foam to them. And that's the current model. And there is no absence of movement, even when there's nothing. And particles come out when this foam basically forms a clump that persists. That's called a particle. But all this, so this quantum foam, that's a fairly new model. I think it's only been around for maybe 10 or 20 years, but it agrees with observation, and it can't be false. It hasn't been falsified. So there never was a time when there was no movement. There's some kind of dynamic going on.
It would have to be outside of time.
Yeah, and one of the, this is like when you go back to the beginning of the Big Bang, you go, how far back can we go with our current math and stay consistent? And at what point does the current math break down? And then we simply don't know how to model anything beyond the singularity where our math breaks down. And people make up all kinds of stories. There are now plausible or serious theories of before the Big Bang, even though the word before is a reference to time, and time begins at the Big Bang. So the notion of like, what's north of the North Pole? It's sort of like it's a meaningless question, but they still talk about before there was time. And it's kind of a paradox, but they're trying to figure out, how to answer that question in a way that's not nonsense. The point is, the words that we make up are inadequate. We make up words. We make up words, and we think that these words stand for something concrete, but they're a little bit sloppy. These words are a little bit vague and sloppy, and can be interpreted more than one way. And eventually, these words run out of substance. They start naming things that don't make sense anymore.
Yeah, well, that was a concept I saw in a science fiction movie where they're trying to talk to aliens have landed. It's called The Arrival. And in trying to understand their language, they had to redefine time.
Yeah, and land and landed. You can't land unless you have land to land on.
Yeah.
And on means you have to have a time and a space to which to have the action happen. And happen is a word. So all these words are predicated on the notion of time, before and after, cause and effect.
I'm just challenging thought processes to go to a place where there is no time and then try to communicate.
Well, then
Like,
there's no neural
communication.
networks. There's no neural networks. There's no sound waves or radio waves or light waves, because all those involve processes that evolve over time. If you take away time and you have to take away space and time at the same time, because time and space are interwoven. You can't just take away time and not space. So if you take away space and time, then you have prior to the Big Bang. And God only knows, and he ain't saying what that is. The scientists will try to speculate it, but it becomes a new religion, becomes a new creation myth.
It's a fun thought process. I'm not saying that everyone should do it, but
Yeah.
it's definitely.
What did you think of
enjoyable.
before there was such a thing as thinking? What was the thought that you had before there was thinking?
So sometimes you have to do that thing like with Moses, where it's not about you. I am. You have to take away the I.
Right. Right.
In order to do that, you have to take away the I, because the I is always relative, and thus there's always time and space.
And you can't say becoming, the gerund, without time, because to be, to become presupposes time. The name of the deity of Moses presupposes progression in time, evolution, becoming, presupposes it.
Yeah.
You can't say was, is, will be without time. The words assume time.
Well, it's also a trajectory of a launching off point. And I think in sake of keeping this conversation from going too philosophical, because I brought it there, where are we in time right now as a group? That's my question for everybody.
Well, this group,
What is, yeah.
we are, let's see, well, I'll give you three words that may one of them could be the answer. These are Greek words, but they're real words. The first word is aporia, A-P-O-R-I-A. The second word is epoche, E-P-O-C-H-E. And the third word is ataraxia, A-T-A-R-A-X-I-A. We could be in aporia, we could be in epoche, we could be in ataraxia, or maybe none of those. And these are very old ideas because they're old Greek words, okay? Aporia means we're in a state of confusion or uncertainty or bewilderment or not knowing, and knowing that we don't have it sorted out in our head. Epoche is suspension of disbelief so we can just enjoy the present, at like going to a movie. And we're not expecting the movie to be a true story. We're going to suspend disbelief to enjoy a story. And ataraxia is serene, tranquil. I don't really care. It's not important. To let it be. And people go through these phases. You start with aporia. What the hell? I'm confused. You're scratching your head. I don't get this. Epoche, well, let me suspend disbelief and just explore some possibilities, their entertainment value. And anorexia, well, okay. What, me worry? You know, Alfred E. Newman, let it be. You know, stop worrying about it and just relax. Those are three possibilities. Where are we? I think we're in aporia if we're in any of those three. But I could be wrong. I could be there's something other than those three that we haven't got a word for. There's a gap. I mean, unconscious, we could just be unconscious. I don't think we are, but if we were unconscious, we couldn't, you can't even be in aporia, confused, unless you're conscious. Is a rock confused? If it's, you know. So I think we're at least able to be in a state of aporia, and maybe not much beyond it, except when we watch Netflix. Then we voluntarily enter a state of epoche, suspension of disbelief, sit back and enjoy the movie. Don't try to judge it as true or false, just a story. And then say, all right, I've read Shakespeare, I've read all the Greek, okay, and now I'm just gonna be serene and relaxed and tranquil and let the world be whatever it is. I no longer have the world on my shoulders. It is what it is. La-di-da.
I see the pro and the cons of each stage. I call it stages. You know, in terms of learning perspective, you can start with any stage you want, and you go through them. And the best, I guess, the deeper learning will be when you go through all three stages. That will give you the best deep learning. Where
do children begin? Make believe, fairy tales. They sit down, they say, tell me a story. Let's go into the world and make believe. Doesn't have to be scientifically correct or a legend or a false religion. Let's do make believe. Just play in the sandbox. Children start off with make believe. And if you tell a story that's in make believe and parts of the story are inconsistent, the kid will pipe up and say, wait a second. Page 1 of the story you said this, but page 2 of the story you contradicted it. It can't both be true. So now you're beginning to go back to aporia, going, this has to be coherent. It can't be gibberish. A lot of politics is gibberish. It's not even make-believe, it's gibberish.
Well,
How can
it's
Sean
called
Hannity say
capitalism.
that? How can Tucker Carlson say that? It's nonsense. You know,
Yeah.
it's not even
That's what
make-believe,
you're
it's
saying about
gibberish.
it. Well, the incoherence aspect of reality is part of someone saying my story is the story, that this is my show on Netflix and you need to watch this.
Right.
And we're all experiencing life as the actor and the camera at the same time,
Right. And the audience. Yeah.
and the audience.
Yeah. We're the writer of the story, the actor of the story, the audience of the story, the directors, and the film critic of the story.
Director,
Yeah.
producer, whatever you call that.
And by the
Yeah.
way, there's a very famous passage in the New Testament where just before the last chapter, where they're about to go into Jerusalem and then Jesus is going to get arrested and tried and convicted, Jesus is revealing to his disciple Peter the plot. He says, we're going to go into Jerusalem. I'm going to get arrested. I'm going to get tried. I'm going to get convicted. And Peter says, oh my God, we can't have this. This is terrible. I don't like this plot. Let's change the story. And Jesus says to Peter, his accomplice, he says, get thee behind me, Satan. Calls him adversary. Get out of here, doofus. You're thinking of this story from the point of view of a character in the story, and not from the point of view of the author of the story. It's a really interesting passage. Jesus is playing the role of the central character, the author, and he's explaining to Peter the role of all the characters. And Peter says, I don't like the story, let's change it. He said, no. You're acting as if you're a character in the story, which you are, but you're not perceiving it as the author of the story. And from the point of view of the story, this is how the story has to go, or else it's no good. Nobody learns anything. Get thee behind me, Satan. You are thinking about this from the point of view of the human, not from the point of view of the deity, the author. It's a very powerful observation, a meta observation. And if you're an educator, sometimes you have to act the role of a character who is not the teacher. When I was watching the children's educational shows like Howdy Doody and Lamb Chop, and the presenter was putting on a character. Captain Kangaroo or Howdy. They were playing these roles because the role was enabling the children in the audience to gain insight. But they were playing roles. And that was the genius of these children's, the Muppets with Jim Henson. They had this pedagogical insight to imagine how to create a story, and then he would play Kermit the Frog. Jim Henson played Kermit the Frog. He was the voice of Kermit. He was a character, but he was also the author and the director at the same time. And if he didn't do it that way, the children wouldn't gain anything from watching it. They would just be listening to some preacher like me, listening to some stupid preacher. Shut up, let's have some fun. Stop preaching.
Anytime you need a puppet, there you go.
That's cute. No, I wish I could do that. You can teach me someday. So you can go back to these, these legends and whatever, you can see some great insights in them. Pedagogical insight, systems thinking insight, before they had names for them. Although I think pedagogy is a Greek word that probably they had in those days. So. Metaphysics.
There's a lot before the Greeks. That's my only point in this conversation is to bring up is the Western.
I don't disagree. Yeah. It's just that we don't have a whole lot of legacy writings. A lot of that's been lost. It's hard.
No. So not everything's in writing form. Like the map is the territory. I like to say that the map is not the territory, but the territory is the story.
Yeah.
And as you go to these different territories, you can see a lot of writing that doesn't exist in a languaging, but it's in a storytelling that is the actual area that you're in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
the
language
rock
itself is very
formations.
important. The Asian languages, the Chinese languages and those, they're very different languages. And you can express things in those languages that you can't express in English and vice versa. Our language is very this is a
Well, which languages do you speak, Sam? Are you?
I speak about 7 languages. So it depends on what situation and all that stuff. I mean, my primary language is, the way I think about this, what language do I dream in? In the beginning of the United States, living here, I dream in Chinese, my native dialect, and then English is my late, the last 20 years of my dream in English. So, but it helps me to each language. When you speak a Chinese, let's say I'm speaking Chinese, I have to have no choice but to see everything in Chinese perspective. That's why I use Google Translate. When I translate over there, they give me a perspective from a Chinese perspective that I can just see. So think of it like you pick up a telescope versus a microscope, right? So like when I speak in that language, I'm picking up that lens, and that culture comes with the language. You can think of it as a baggage. You can think of that perspective. You can think of it as a gift. So it gives you a defensive so I can see things much clearer than a lot of people, native speaker of English, because I see that from the different perspectives. Sort of like it's snowing. Okay, if I think of Eskimo language, I'm better off than you if I want to try to drive. Or so what I'm saying. So it's like when you have deeper meaning of the language, it gives you the edge that you won't get it any other way. So the telescope versus microscope kind of perspective. So Chinese is a very rich language. It has so many wisdom in there that my father was wise enough to make sure I go to Chinese school instead of going to, we can go to English school as well. So, but I've gone through all the Chinese. Then my English is not as good, but it compromised for my Chinese is very good. So that perspective. So
Which dialect of Chinese?
well, the most popular dialect is one that speak in Taiwan. It's called Hokkien. Okay, so it's a southern part of Chinese. There's Hokkien. So if you go to Taiwan, you can speak the regular Mandarin with them. You can also speak their local dialect. So that's my native. I was born with that dialect. And then, of course, then there's a slightly to the west side where the Thailand is the Chinese is called Teochew, which is a different dialect. But it's almost like have 30% of overlapping. So when you grow up, you grew up in Malaysia. I was born in Malaysia, where we have multiple counties of Chinese economy. So we speak multiple dialects because of the multiple languages, as well as Malay languages, which is you have to pass the language in Malaysian language. It's a national language. Otherwise, you fail everything, all 12, 13 subject or 14 subject. And because Malaysia is close to Indonesia, so that's about 30%, 40% of overlapping. And then because I grew up with Indonesian, so I speak Indonesian as well. So you have to go into that mode to speak it. So before I learned a new language, I was in US. I'm trying to learn the 8 language. The first thing I do is I make sure I read a lot of culture book first. Once I learn the culture, learning a language is much easier.
Is the culture different from the Mandarin that's spoken in Taiwan to the Indonesian language? Are there overlap?
Night and day.
Overlap?
Night and day. Let me give you one simple example. So for example, I want to talk about, I want to say 3 times 5, right? So in Indonesian, it's the reverse. You say 5, you take 5 and make it 3 times or something like that. So it's like the best example I give is fried banana. Fried banana in English, in Chinese will be fried banana, but in Malay language or the Indonesian language will be banana fried.
So the thing and then the action.
Yes, right. Yeah, everything is like that. So it's a very passive. They're very passive culture. They're very passive in everything that they think about. So if you try to be aggressive, you get in trouble.
Yeah, that's very different. If I just started putting my brain into the thing and then the action.
Right.
It's a
So
different way.
yeah, Filipinos the same thing. Filipino language and in Malay language and Indonesian language is very close to each other. So they are very passive. If you notice, the Filipino are much more passive than the Chinese, much more aggressive.
Yeah, I noticed that in my relationship with a Filipino lady is I'm very aggressive
That's
in
right.
English,
Yeah,
and she's very passive.
That's
and we
right.
sometimes miss each other because of
Yeah.
the passive versus the aggressive.
and notice that they smile, they laugh before they talk.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you, Sam. That helps me a lot actually in my relationship. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. So when passive is in some ways passive, you can get into passive aggressive. So they have more passive aggressive people than we do.
Yeah. But how would you speak about aggression in that language? If it's the thing and then the action, not the action then the thing.
The best way you can think of it is that you just focus on what's the goal, right? So when you have a goal like I want to have some fried banana, okay? So the way you think about it, you think of fried banana, right? So that you do things to the object. I'm frying the banana. But for them, you see the object first, like this is a banana. Could you fry it for me?
And so it's the path to the end is a
It's a
different path.
request. It's
Yeah.
a request. Would that be okay for you to do this for me? Language structure.
Okay.
It's
S'il
just
vous plaît. S'il vous plaît, if you please, may I?
Yeah. It's a
French say s'il vous plaît, and which we say in
Oui.
English, please. But often in English, we don't even say please. We simply give a directive. Fry this for me. Not if you please. Could you fry this for me?
pourquoi? Pourquoi?
For what?
Very,
Why?
est-ce que tu parles en français? Yeah. Why would you speak in that way? Fry this for me, as opposed to if you please.
It's acknowledging free will. It's built into the language in French to give the other person the license to say yes or no. Whereas if you make a demand in English, it's much more authoritarian, like I expect you to do this, and damn it, you better do it or else. There'll be consequences.
I'm trying to teach my daughter the pleases, thank yous, and the you're welcomes to instill that communication style of it's not something that someone has to do. It's a gift and an honor
Right.
to do it. And you should be grateful if someone does that for you. You say, thank
If
you.
it's okay with you, and if you don't mind, would you be kind enough to? So they're giving you a gift of their own volition. They're not a
Yeah.
slave. That
Correct.
we lose in English, our American English culture, we lose that that grace.
yeah. So Joshua, the best example I can give you to learn language is have your daughter close her eye and put her hand like this, and she speaks something. Do this for me, so the energy go down or goes up. So it's like, would you please do this for me? So it's
That's very wise.
close your eye. The key is close your eye because you don't want any distraction when you're managing, you're calibrating try that right now. Close your eye.
Yep.
Do this for me. Where's your energy? Put your hands up, put your arms up. Show me where's the energy going, up or down. Okay.
I felt it down.
Yeah, down. So you make it flat, tilt it down. Now, would you mind do this for me, please?
Yeah.
So when she can feel the energy of her spoken verbal language, she can learn it in her body. So kinesthetically, she can learn it a lot faster, more efficiently because you have muscle memory to help her.
That's very like the Chinese speaking of the different tones.
Yeah, different tones. So it's like, yeah, different tone it's not the energy management, but if you focus on energy management, like again, put your hand like this, close your eye. We can talk all we want. Okay, is that okay if I say something nice right now? You can feel the energy level go up.
For me, it felt down because
Yeah.
of you said, for me right now. Like
Yeah, so
very low.
see, if you don't, so you have to ignore the tonality, you have to focus on the energy. That's why there's so much distraction in the communication language that is. I hide, I put up, I stand up right now, you can feel the energy changes, right? So that's why it's so focused on the energy. If you know how to calibrate your energy, you know how to speak nicely, be more respectful.
We're wearing practically the same shirt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, the calibration of tones and the energy. My language is an energy language. I like to speak. There, like a lot of my Asian friends said, I would meet them and just naturally I put my head down for the energy.
Right.
And then my Korean friend, she said, Josh is not making fun of the Korean culture. He just does that to everybody. And I do that to, it doesn't matter what
That's right.
culture you come from. I just, it's natural to me.
Yeah, when you do the things that the culture is doing, you are now, you're the brotherhood. You know, you're in the gang, in the tribe. So they don't feel danger. As soon as you do this and they're this, yeah, they feel a danger. So it's like if I use a wrong grammar on I'm talking about whatever I'm talking about, if I use a wrong grammar, then you notice that I'm not as smart as I verbally express myself. So it's all that. So one example I can give you is that one of the jokes that someone said that I've been practicing saying I love you to my wife for the last 30 years, and my French friend tell me that I say it wrong. So I say, how do you say it? Sort of like, I love you. It's like, I love you. Like, no, the tonality makes a difference. The gesture make a difference. The way you say and the way you smile make a difference. So it's a whole package.
Yeah, the French communication of love is very different also.
That's right. Unless you get it, you don't have it.
It's an aggressive love. I love you.
Yeah,
love you.
that's right.
Like,
You know what I'm
it's
talking
very,
about. You know what I'm talking about. So
yeah.
unless you get all the, think of it like you tune your engine, tune your the tires pressure, everything had to be perfect in order for get your Ferrari to get the top speed. So optimization on multiple parameters adjustment is the key right here. How does people sense danger?
There's a scene in one of the Woody Allen movies. I can't remember the female lead in it, but he wants to say I love you, but he can't just use the word love. He has to somehow emphasize. He says I loathe you, which sounds like loathe. What he says, I loathe you. I can't remember who the female is in that.
Well, thank you for bringing that dynamic of the communication, because that's what I feel is missing in the English language.
Yeah,
Is
the
the
other part of the language is also like, now notice it, I'm saying to say something to you, I'm looking at the screen right now, but all I do is I'm saying something to you, Joshua, can you see can you feel the difference right now?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Way. Yeah.
I mean, like that. I mean, subtle things, like I'm talking to you, I'm looking down, I'm looking up, it makes all the difference in the world. And as soon as you pay attention to that and have her practice doing that, you do it to her and she do it to you, so that she can feel the feedback. The more feedback you can get her in the body and the muscle, the more she can learn better.
Diane Keaton.
And play with that.
Yeah.
I remember one time I was visiting an older couple, and the wife wanted to make sure that the husband got the message. So she stood right in front of him. She put her hands on his shoulders. She looked him straight in the eye. She said the message, and the tone of voice, the facial expression, the body, I counted 4 channels were sending the same message in parallel.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed by that observation that I wrote a blog post called 4-Channel Communication.
Yeah. This is how I tell our parents. You can tell them, kids don't smoke.
Right. 4-Channel communication.
So whatever they're doing, I say to them, whatever you're doing, whatever you're saying, whatever you're handling a problem or confrontation, your kids will be mirroring you right now in all 5 channels.
Yeah. Yeah. You just remind me to smoke. Thank you, Sam.
Oh.
And that's
Yeah,
good luck in teaching your kids not to smoke.
I don't know about that. I don't smoke in front of my kid.
Of course
but,
not.
yeah.
They don't need to see you smoking in front of them.
Yeah, it's not something that I wanted to pick up, but I had to learn to smoke when I was 30
Right.
because nobody smoked around me when I was growing up. So I didn't learn how to smoke.
Got
So I
Why
had
did
to-
you decide to learn how to smoke?
I think when I was 28, I first tried it, and it wasn't something that really fit with me because I didn't like smoking. I didn't like people that smoked. I didn't like it at all. And I learned in the bars in New York that when you're talking with someone, it was a time when you could smoke in the bars, and they would all be lighting a cigarette, and I wanted to talk to them, but I didn't like the smoke. So instead of pushing that away, I embraced it, and I ended up moving to New York because I was just visiting.
It's
And
like
that's when I
learning how to
learned to
drink.
smoke.
It's like learning how to drink beer. The first time you drink beer, it tastes terrible.
I had to learn how to drink beer as well. That was another thing I did. I wasn't very good at drinking beer, so I learned to drink Guinness and smoke cigarettes at the same time.
And almost anything, the first time you try it, it's a little awkward and uncomfortable. And then you learn to enjoy it eventually.
Yeah,
Stacy, are you still there?
I'm here.
I heard a sigh.
Yeah. I'm here.
You want to talk to us?
So I learned how not to smoke when I was 7. So it's good like this. I
Yeah,
come from
I
a very small village, a tiny fisher village that it takes me like a month to accumulate about $1. And my teacher in the first grade says, bring me the $1 after he instructed me to save up money for it. And he rolled out like a cigarette. And he tried to light the matches and try to smoke it in front of me. I grab it from him. I say, it takes me a month to save up the money. Why do you burn the money? I say, well, when you smoke, that's what you're doing.
Ah,
Oh, he lit the money.
Yeah, he lit the money. He did the dollar bill like in front of me, and he tried to match it and because in my culture, in my village, almost everybody smoke. In fact, all the male teachers smoke except him, right? And he would try to teach me something. He says, save up money until you bring me $1. So I can save it, take me about a month to save up money, and then roll $1 and try to put it up and try to lead the fire. I don't care who it is. You're not thinking, but it's, take it away from him. It's like, this is what we will be doing when you smoke. I say, oh, how stupid of all my teachers.
that's a great lesson. I think that's wonderful.
When I was 18, I learned not to smoke. So when I was 5, my whole family smoked, and I would ask for a puff, and they would give us a puff because they didn't think there was anything wrong with it. So that was really cute. And then by the time I was about 9, it was fun for me and my cousin to try to steal cigarettes from the grown-ups by going under the table and having them not notice. So that was an activity. By the time we were 12, we would look for cigarette butts on the floor that weren't really that much smoked. And then by the time I was 14, I was a chain smoker, and the cigarettes, and my mother always promised, don't lie to me. If you come to me for permission, I will give it to you. And so I came to her for permission, and she said, no way. So then it became something fun to do. So I would meet my friends at the deli and we would smoke. So that was exciting. And then the price kept going up and up and up. I remember it being like 38 cents. And then it probably went up to 78 cents. And then my uncle got throat cancer. And then my grandfather got cancer. And then I said, what am I doing? And then I said, I'm going to quit on Monday. And everybody said, oh, you can't quit cold turkey. And that's all I needed for them to tell me, is that I can't do it.
Reverse
Oh, wow.
psychology.
And that was my story.
Remind me to use reverse psychology on you in the future.
Very funny, because somehow I knew the term reverse psychology very early, because I was I know I was in my old apartment, and I know when we moved, so I had to be 7 or 8 years old, and my mother said something to me, and I said to her, don't try to use reverse psychology on me. And I only remember it because she told the story so many times, but I knew that phrase.
Then you use meta reverse psychology, and then meta reverse psychology, and it's turtles all the way down.
Very funny though, because we were talking about manipulation and I was explaining something to her. You know, we have different political views, but you know, we try to talk. And I told her honestly, I said, you know, we were talking about manipulation. I was saying, I really don't like manipulation. And I try to be very careful to not do it to other people. And, you know, she was saying, well, I never manipulated. I was like, you were very manipulative. And she couldn't understand that. I was trying to give her examples. And then we just agreed that we have a different understanding about what manipulation actually means. But mine is the one in the dictionary.
Yeah, the Jewish guilt is, I think Jewish guilt is very real. I grew up with a lot of that in my family that, oh, you're going to do that. Well, that, you know how that's going to make me feel, but go ahead. It's your choice. Go ahead, do it. It's
Yeah, I'm gonna suffer.
No, we got Jewish guilt with
I'll
reverse
suffer.
psychology. No, we got
Oh,
the two
geez.
mixed in. I don't want to be a burden on you.
That's where Meshuggah comes from.
Before I
Meshuggah
forget,
is
we at the
Victoria.
call, I was going to say, I heard an interesting manipulation story this week about when they invented the jet engine on a military base. The guy who flew the first jet without a propeller flew it in a monkey suit with a top hat.
Why?
And he did that because anyone on the military base that said, I saw a plane without a propeller and there was a monkey flying it with a top hat, then they gaslighted all of the people on the military base to think they were crazy. That's not possible.
It's funny.
Well, that's cute. Subtle, but cute.
Yeah, it was an interesting story. I just had to share that that gaslighting. That's a next level military gaslighting.
Is it, by the way, is that an urban legend?
I don't know. I just heard this story. I don't know if it's true, but according
Dollars and
to,
Donuts, it's an urban legend.
look up the first jet and see if that's a true story. I don't know.
I asked Google Bard the other day about urban legends. Oh, my browser's gone into a state of hypoxia.
Well, I'm gonna
It
check
seemed
out.
to work very well because, yeah. Yep,
I'm sorry.
I think it's that time.
Yes, have a great.
Thank you so much, Sam. I'm going to practice the ups and downs. And,
Yeah. Put your hand like this and just noticing goes up. and
That's
comes down.
very good because I have a correspondent. You may have seen him. He's a very strange character. He lives in Monterrey, Mexico, and his name is Esteban Trev. And he has this very strange behavior, which flummoxes me. He writes in word salads, which you no diagrammable sentences. But he has this notion about whether it's up or down.
Yeah.
It's part of the meme, and I couldn't quite figure out what he was referring to, but maybe that's what that does he consider a remark this way or that way, and if he thinks it's that way, he gives you back a word salad gibberish. And I always get back word salad gibberishes from him. But I know that he can write in coherent paragraphs, but almost never see it.
Yeah.
well, I've been meaning to learn Mandarin for a long time. And I think with my daughter learning English, I think that's a good language for her to learn.
Well, think of language is multiple channel, right? So it's like if you can smell the language, you can taste the language, you can hear the language, you can feel the language. The more you can attach the language to the channel, the more channel you have, the better you can learn it. So for example, when we try to memorize it, we try to memorize it verbally, we try to memorize it auditorily, or well, we try to memorize kinesthetically. If you use all 5 channels to memorize something, it's so much easier to memorize.
Absolutely.
Something. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's all.
That's a great advice.
Yeah.
That's Italians, like I'm half Italian and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
speak a lot.
Yeah,
I do a lot of this.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I
And
remember a
it's
story that,
genetic. It's not even.
yeah, my daughter was a 3rd grade and she learned Chinese takes about 2 hours per week for learning Chinese, and she was having so much hard time that taking her month to memorize about like 30 words chapter that she have to recite it in front of the class. She has struggled on the Thursday night, because Friday night is the night that she need to present herself. I say, okay, come on, stand in front of me. I have her act out the word that she say each word. As soon as she act out, she memorized kinesthetically. It take only 1 turn. She memorized the whole chapter. Yeah, so again, the more you make use of the channel, the easier it gets. That's why all the channels is there for you to use.
Very nice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm glad I'm useful.
Appreciate it. Barry, I'm so happy to see you playing with ChatGPT. It makes me happy.
Well, you can thank Sam for it because
Thank you, Sam.
I couldn't get onto it because it wanted a cell phone number, and I don't have one. Finally,
I was trying to get you on it 3 months before, so I'm just very happy that Sam stepped up and did that.
Sam basically said, you can use my cell phone number, I'll do the validate, and instantly I'm in. And Bard, you don't need that. Bard, but so, and then Sam stepped up and says, I want you to try GPT-4. I said, that's $20 a month. It isn't worth it. Sam says, not a problem. I use my credit card. So I have ChatGPT-4 as well.
Yeah. Just to share with you this week, Amazon just released their version of their large language model. So I'm saying Vicuña, Amazon's version, Alpaca, they're all starting to intercorrelate with each other. And I think that's going to be the fun moving forward, is having a memory system like Pinecone, and then the different language models grabbing from that memory. So things will start to unite together.
So is Amazon's free like ChatGPT and Bard?
I just saw it last night that they made a big announcement this week.
It's okay. I'll look for it.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with how they're coding. So they're giving their model to allow for coders to code.
Oh, I'm not eligible
AWS.
yet. They're still in beta. Yeah. If they're in beta, I can't get onto it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, be aware that people are starting to, like last year when I was working with a lot of AI people, they were meshing the different image models before the language models to allow for stable diffusion, to talk to Midjourney, to allow for some of the information from one to carry over to another. It's a merging of multiple different models, because a lot of these neural programming is still a mystery. So we don't know how one is doing what the other is doing.
Yeah, it's interesting because they have different guardrails. So sometimes ChatGPT will balk and say, I'm not going to answer that. It's against my guidelines. Or Bard will do that. And when one of them balks, the other one doesn't, then I tell the other one what the other one said. And I get this shuttle diplomacy thing going back and forth. And they'll eventually converge. Each one will agree with the other. If the one who doesn't respond says, that's outside of my allowance, but it will consent to what the other one said.
I think by installing it on your computer and having one talk to the other, but use auto GPT so that they can have a conversation overnight, and then in the morning ask them what they come up with.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that I've done, they converge within 2 cycles. I mean, just I get an answer from this one, I tell it to that one, it gives the response I give to that one, and they're basically converged.
But I think where it gets interesting is give it to one and then ask that to describe what that would look like, and give that to a stable diffusion image model, and then give it to ChatGPT-4 to read in other words, going from description to image, back to description.
I don't have access yet to anything. I may have access to Midjourney, but I haven't really learned how to use it. So I haven't done any image or audio formatted stuff yet, even though theoretically I could go to Midjourney and give a description and get back.
But you have that with ChatGPT-4. It does do image modeling.
So I could tell it ChatGPT-4, give me a picture. How do I do that?
I believe so.
Don't I have to buy a plugin?
No.
All right. Well, I need to find out how to do that, because for now, I haven't understood that I can do image or audio with GPT-4 without also subscribing to some plugin service.
You definitely can do 3D modeling with ChatGPT-4, and it will do mapping of point dot in 3D. So I'm saying try it with puzzles. I'd like to see.
Well, I did it with this logic puzzle. Were you on when we're talking about the logic puzzle? Maybe you didn't connect. I gave it a logic puzzle from a high school math exam, a national high school math exam. And I gave it this logic puzzle, and none of the LLM GPTs could reason through this logic puzzle that a competent high school student can solve in 20 minutes.
Yeah, I did hear you say that. That's why I'm saying give it more images and see how it can read the
Well, this
images.
particular logic puzzle doesn't have images. It's a word problem.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's a knight. If you know about knights and knaves, it's a knights and knaves puzzle.
you
Where-
were telling me about names.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and the problem is that you say, well, this character always lies or lies half the time. And it knows what that means in the context, but 2 or 3 paragraphs later, it's gone back to the dictionary meaning of liar, meaning that they sometimes lie.
so here's my point: is give it a visual of the lie, the vector, the point divergence. Give it the visual to teach it the knights and knaves, because
They never had, I mean, these knights and knaves puzzles have been around for 40 years. They don't have pictures. They just have, you go to the island, you meet the natives. Some natives are knaves, they always lie. Some are knights, they always tell the truth. A native who you don't know what they are says this, or you ask them a question and this is the
Yeah.
answer, figure out the ground truth. That's what these are.
But
no picture.
I've seen visuals of the Byzantine generals principle. So I'm saying there has to be visuals of if this communication is coming from here and this communication is, if you can give it the diagram.
You'd have to somehow invent a a green cloud would be a statement that is known to be true or coming from someone. I don't know. I mean, I have to think about how to encode it, because the problem is that when you ask a yes, no question and you don't know if the respondent is a liar or a truth teller, then you can't just ask an arbitrary question. You have to ask it a carefully crafted question that involves a double negative.
Yeah.
Because
I'm
a
just
liar
thinking
with
back to- do you remember the Gödel Escher Bach where he tried to map out all and it went off the page?
the semantic network and the juicing, right? Yeah. By the
I'm
way,
saying it might need to see the visual of those things in order to map it back to the language modeling.
yeah,
Well, think of picture is another channel of representation,
Yeah.
right? If you can get
Yeah.
the representation right, then the chance of getting it back. So it's like if I translate something to French and I got it in French right, the French language can translate back to English and it will match exactly the initial words that I'm using or something along that line. It's just
But
another channel.
it
right?
took a whole book, Gödel Escher Bach, to show that the mathematics of Kurt Gödel and the visual arts of M.C. Escher and the music of J.S. Bach had the same underlying pattern
Mm.
in completely seemingly unrelated languages. Took them a whole friggin' book to get that across, and that book
Yeah.
ain't easy to read.
Well, but I'm saying Sam just said today the visual with the tone,
right.
Yeah.
with the words
Yeah.
together. I'm saying the same thing with these language models. You
That's
can't
right.
just do
Text.
a languaging. You
Right.
need the visual along with it so it can neurally map it properly.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to say in the context of it, this word has a very precise meaning for the duration of this context. And
Yeah.
don't stray away from this precise definition in the context of this act. This, I say, I tried to make it actors on stage doing a sketch. And so an actor is playing the role of a liar. And so this actor always has to utter a falsehood. I thought if I could, no, it's 2 or 3 sentences later, it's back to the ordinary, on the street behavior of these. It couldn't understand an actor acting a role which is directed by the structure of the scene. It just kept drifting away from that context.
I'm saying the miracle that happened with ChatGPT was when it was able to read all the code in GitHub and be trained on the logic of that code.
Yeah.
So I'm saying if there is a visual representation of the logic of the knights and knaves,
Yeah.
and
Which
if
there
there's
isn't.
not, see if you can help create that.
Yeah. Well, I tried to do it by moving from the knights and knaves to the actors doing a sketch. And I thought that would work.
Yeah,
And
That's
and
not
it sort of worked. For example, I said, suppose that you could be wearing a red hat or a blue hat. And the people who are wearing red hats always tell falsehoods. People wearing blue hats always tell the truth. And you look at a person and you say that, and you see that they're wearing a red hat, and you ask them, are you wearing a blue hat? What would they say? And it got that one right. It knows, well, if I see he's wearing a red hat and I ask him if he has a blue hat, he's going to say yes, because that's a lie. But then if I say a person who's a liar, I say, are you a truth teller? He'll say no. I go, how can you get it right when I have the hat, but if I call you a liar,
well, I
and you
think,
know
yeah,
that you're
the
supposed to
word-
lie, how come you can't get
The word
how come-
lie is the confusing part for the chat model.
That's
Right.
right. So there's no presentation for it. I want to
Because
make
red
sure you
hat and
got
blue
it.
hat isn't already in the dictionary, whereas liar is already a dictionary word, and it keeps reverting back to the normal usage of the word, as opposed to red person wearing a red hat.
Yeah.
That doesn't have a predefined.
Right.
So you could stick with the context because it didn't have an alternative context to drift off to. And I couldn't figure out a way to
I think
keep
Sam's
it
trying
in
to speak.
context.
Yeah, to think of it like I give you something spicy hot. So English hot like, or like it was really hot in my tongue. It was just the hot temperature smoking hot. You know, so
Yeah.
where is it? So the visual presentation will help you to say where's the spicy hot versus the temperature hot, right?
Right.
So unless it was a hot,
Exactly.
lying the same problem. It's like unless I can see the visually, I cannot tell you whether it's a spicy hot unless you use the additional words
Yeah.
to differentiate the difference and make the difference is what I'm looking for.
And this is where I would go to a technical word. I think, is it capsicum? Is that the name of the thing that makes it taste hot? There's a word for what's the ingredient. think
I
it's
know what
capsicum.
you're trying to say. Yeah.
So I say,
The-
now I give you a turnip that has capsicum in it as a flavor. And I don't say temperature hot or spicy. I simply say capsicum. And now
Yeah, but
it only has
human beings do what Sam just said.
right. But the point is that it doesn't have real life experience because it doesn't have. So I would have to use technical jargon. If I use technical jargon that is absolutely unique, doesn't have another definition if I go to the dictionary.
Yeah.
But now
I'm just saying we're in a new world now where we can teach the computer how to see and how to represent textually what it sees, but also how to draw. And I think that's a new world of I've been playing with it, and it's really fun to tell it to draw 3D objects and then put that into these Blender or Unity, these different computer engines. So I'm saying, let it learn to draw and then understand the knights and knaves.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it could do well. Where's Waldo just fine. Whereas I look at Where's Waldo, I go, geez, it's going to take me forever to find Waldo in this. A friend of mine posted a photograph of a classroom in a big auditorium classroom, and he didn't put any just a picture, no words. And I look at it, I go, what is it about this picture that's supposed to be interesting? And I stare at it, and in the foreground, there's one student who's got their laptop open. You see an image on their laptop. It's not text, it's a picture. I go, what the hell is that a picture of? And then I see a person in front of them who's got dark hair, but from the back, it looks like a zombie. But no, it's just a person with dark hair. Finally, I notice one of the characters in the audience is a dog, intently facing the front, because there's also another guy looking behind him. And I go, it took me 5 minutes to see the dog. The one thing that doesn't belong was the dog. Everything else, not implausible, a little bit, not paying attention or deceptive. The person I thought was a zombie, no, that's not a zombie. That's just a person with just dark hair from the back, and it looked like a zombie. I couldn't see a face. These things are probably a lot better at finding Waldo than I am. You probably would have said, oh, there's a dog right there in the middle of the picture. That dog doesn't belong. Now, would a ChatGPT know that in a college classroom, there wouldn't be a dog in the audience? Would it know that? It would know that it's a dog, but how does it know that the dog is what's out of place? Why can't there be a dog in the audience?
We'll play with that. There's I'll have to play with that with you sometime. There's a lot of interesting things. That was the big breakthrough that Fei Fei Li, the lady from Google, the AI from she came from Stanford, but to understand what you just said, would it know if there's not supposed to be a dog? That's kind of how we got to this point with these neuro models.
I mean, you could imagine if this was some event, let's say in the amphitheater, and a person brought their dog. So what? No, that's fine. In a lecture classroom where you say, well, this is clearly a lecture classroom.
Until
Look at it and
tomorrow.
go, you have to have so much world knowledge.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a lot. I know we could talk for hours. I should probably go because I'm getting texted, but
okay.
let's play with the language. I'm saying the language is one thing, but the visuals are another thing. And I think it's really important to have visuals.
When I get the affordance of being able to do input and output of visuals, that'll be very interesting. I don't yet have that affordance.
I believe you have that with ChatGPT 4.
I'll have to look into that because I haven't found it yet.
Yeah, because in the demo for ChatGPT 4, he drew on a napkin a website and then had it read it, and then wrote the code for that website.
Because I have sent, not ChatGPT, well, ChatGPT 4 won't go to a website, Bard will. I've given Bard URLs to my articles on my blog, and it goes to them and it reads the title and then just makes up a story about what's in it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, find the part on OpenAI where it has image input and output, and that'll take you to the next level.
All right. It may be that that's for the developers only right now.
I don't believe so.
Or a paid subscriber for the other services.
Just look into it and see.
Okay,
I think it's open for you. You have the pro service, right? The ChatGPT.
So Sam Chan really wanted me to have GPT-4, which is $20 a month. So he said, look, he says, I have a credit card that's going to expire in a few months. I'll give you I'll put in the credit card and authorize it, and it will last for 4 months, and then it'll expire, and it's fine. And he trusts me not to, first of all, I don't know his credit card number because he put in the authorization.
Yeah. Well, while you have access to that, I didn't pay for ChatGPT 4 yet. I will soon. So I'm saying I've seen it. I've watched videos of people do it. I know it exists. Yeah. So see if you can find it.
When you find one of those videos that's succinct and clear,
sure,
and not a privileged beta testing developer.
Let me see if I can find.
I'm guessing it's somebody who's a beta, because OpenAI has the extra things for the beta testing insiders. I'm not an insider.
Yep, I'll check and make sure that it's for everybody and not just for beta testers.
Okay.
All right. Have a good day, Barry.
You too.
Cheers.
Yep. Sam, are you there? Let me just check to see if I can. Sam, I cannot end the meeting, and I cannot stop the recording, I don't think. Let me see. Where's the recording thing? There it is. Okay, Sam, I don't have enough privileges because I'm only a co-host, so I'm just going to leave the meeting, and I will let you know that it was 20 minutes past the second hour.